Hello and welcome. In this video, we will be conducting a case analysis of a significant Philippine Supreme Court decision. The case is Eduardo M. Cojuangco Jr. versus the Sandiganbayan and the people of the Philippines, with the case number GR number 134307, decided on December 21, 1998. By the end of this analysis, you will be able to identify the key facts and background of the case, understand the main legal issues presented to the Supreme Court, explain the Supreme Court's ruling and its reasoning, and finally, identify the legal principles that were applied in reaching that decision. Our objectives are to analyze the facts, identify the issues, explain the ruling, and understand the legal principles. Let's begin with the facts and background of the case. This will provide the necessary context for understanding the legal arguments. The case originated from a complaint filed in 1990 by the Office of the Solicitor General before the Presidential Commission on Good Government, or PCGG. The complaint was against Eduardo Cojuangco Jr., who was the former administrator of the Philippine Coconut Authority, and other members of the PCA Governing Board. They were charged with violating Republic Act No. 3019, the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. The specific accusation was that they conspired to take undue advantage of their public positions and their connections with former President Ferdinand Marcos and First Lady Imelda Marcos. They were accused of granting a 2 million peso donation from a PCA special fund to the Philippine Coconut Producers Federation, or COC-OFED, which is a private entity. The prosecution argued that this act gave COC-OFED unwarranted benefits and prejudiced the Filipino people and the Republic of the Philippines. In 1992, the Office of the Special Prosecutor recommended filing a criminal information against Cojuangco and 5 others. However, the Ombudsman ordered a discussion on a prejudicial question raised by a co-respondent, which caused a significant delay. A prejudicial question is a civil case that must be resolved first because it determines whether the criminal action can proceed. After much deliberation, the Ombudsman finally approved the filing of the information in January 1995, and the case, Criminal Case Number 22,018, was filed with the Sandiganbayan in February 1995. The Sandiganbayan is a special court in the Philippines that has jurisdiction over criminal and civil cases involving graft and corruption committed by public officers. Immediately after the case was filed, the Sandiganbayan issued a warrant for Cojuangco's arrest and imposed a ban on his foreign travel without court approval. Cojuangco posted bail and was conditionally arraigned, pleading not guilty. He also filed several motions, including an opposition to the arrest warrant and a motion to dismiss the case. In October 1995, a special prosecution officer found no probable cause and recommended dismissing the case, a recommendation approved by the Ombudsman in November 1996. However, the Office of the Solicitor General sought reconsideration, leading to further delays. After years of legal maneuvers and unresolved motions, Cojuangco filed a petition for prohibition with the Supreme Court in 1998, seeking to dismiss the case and lift the travel ban. This petition is what we are analyzing today. It was filed after more than 3 years had passed since the criminal information was filed. Now that we have the facts, let's identify the main legal issues that the Supreme Court had to resolve. During the oral arguments, the court suggested that the parties focus on 3 key issues. First, was the warrant of arrest issued by the Sandiganbayan null and void, or should it be lifted even if it was initially valid? This issue centers on the constitutional requirement for a judge to personally determine probable cause before issuing an arrest warrant. Second, were Cojuangco's constitutional rights to due process, speedy trial, and speedy disposition of the case violated, which would warrant the dismissal of the criminal case? This issue examines the long delay in the proceedings and whether it prejudiced the accused. And third, should the ban on Cojuangco's foreign travel be vacated to allow him to go abroad without prior permission from the Sandiganbayan? This issue involves balancing the accused's right to travel against the state's interest in ensuring his presence for trial. To resolve these issues, the Supreme Court relied on several established legal rules and principles. Let's look at the most important ones. First, the court cited Section 2, Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution. This section states that no warrant of arrest shall issue except upon probable cause to be determined personally by the judge. This means a judge cannot simply rely on a prosecutor's report. They must independently review the evidence to find probable cause. Second, The court applied the rule from the case of Ho versus People. This case clarified that the prosecutor's determination of probable cause is for charging the accused, while the judge's determination is for issuing an arrest warrant. They are distinct objectives. The Ho case emphasized that the judge must have supporting evidence, not just the prosecutor's bare report, to make their own independent judgment. Third, the court invoked the principle of waiver of jurisdiction. This principle states that if an accused posts bail or files motions seeking affirmative relief from the court, they are deemed to have submitted to the court's jurisdiction, even if the arrest warrant was invalid. In other words, by participating in the legal process beyond simply challenging the warrant, the accused waives their right to object to the court's jurisdiction over their person. Fourth, the court applied the Crespo versus Mogul rule. This rule is fundamental in criminal procedure. It holds that once a criminal complaint or information is filed in court, any disposition of the case, including its dismissal, rests in the sound discretion of the court. This means that even if the prosecutor recommends dismissal, the court is not bound by that recommendation and must make its own independent assessment. Finally, the court considered the right to speedy disposition of cases. This right is violated only when the proceeding is attended by vexatious, capricious, and oppressive delays. To determine if this right is violated, the court uses a four-factor test: the length of the delay, the reason for the delay, whether the accused asserted their right, and the prejudice caused by the delay. Now, let's see how the Supreme Court applied these rules to the facts of Cojuangco's case and what its final decision was. First, regarding the warrant of arrest, the court found that the Sandiganbayan had only two documents to consider when it issued the warrant: the Ombudsman's resolution recommending the filing of the information, and the special prosecutor's memorandum denying a prejudicial question. Applying the Ho versus People rule, the court concluded that these documents were insufficient for the Sandiganbayan to personally determine probable cause. They were merely the product of someone else's determination. Therefore, the Supreme Court ruled that the warrant of arrest issued against Cojuangco was palpably invalid. However, the court then addressed the crucial issue of jurisdiction. It noted that Cojuangco had posted bail and filed numerous motions seeking affirmative relief from the Sandiganbayan, such as motions to travel abroad and motions for extension of time. Applying the waiver of jurisdiction principle, the court held that by these actions, Cojuangco had voluntarily submitted to the Sandiganbayan's jurisdiction. His subsequent efforts to dispute the warrant's validity were negated by his own conduct. Next, on the issue of dismissing the case due to the Ombudsman's recommendation of no probable cause, the court applied the Crespo versus Mogul rule. It ruled that once the information was filed in court, the power to dismiss the case rested solely with the Sandiganbayan, not the Ombudsman. The Sandiganbayan was not bound by the Ombudsman's finding of no probable cause. Regarding the right to speedy disposition, the court acknowledged that there had been a long delay, particularly in resolving Cojuangco's motion to dismiss. It found the period of over 1 year to be quite long and inexcusable. However, instead of dismissing the case, the court ordered the Sandiganbayan to proceed with the resolution of the pending motions and incidents with utmost dispatch. Finally, on the travel ban, the court noted that Cojuangco had always returned to the Philippines after previous travels, and that the Office of the Solicitor General did not object to lifting the ban. It also considered Cojuangco's role as chairman and CEO of San Miguel Corporation, and the necessity of his travel for business purposes, especially during an economic crisis. Based on these compelling reasons, the court lifted the travel ban for a period of 3 months. Let's summarize the key legal principles that were applied in this case. First, the case reaffirmed the constitutional mandate that a judge must personally determine probable cause before issuing an arrest warrant. This is a crucial safeguard against arbitrary arrests. Second, it clarified the distinction between the prosecutor's probable cause determination for filing a case and the judge's determination for issuing an arrest warrant. They serve different purposes. Third, the case reinforced the principle of waiver of jurisdiction. An accused cannot challenge the validity of an arrest warrant while simultaneously invoking the court's jurisdiction by posting bail or seeking affirmative relief. Fourth, it upheld the Crespo versus Mogul rule, which establishes the court's exclusive discretion over the disposition of a case once it has been filed. This prevents prosecutors from unilaterally withdrawing cases. Fifth, the court applied the four-factor test for determining violations of the right to speedy disposition of cases, emphasizing that not all delays warrant dismissal. And finally, The case demonstrated the balancing act between an accused's constitutional right to travel and the state's interest in ensuring justice. The court will consider compelling reasons to lift travel restrictions. In conclusion, the Cojuangco case is a landmark decision that clarifies several important aspects of criminal procedure in the Philippines, particularly concerning probable cause, jurisdiction, and the right to speedy disposition of cases. We have now analyzed the facts, identified the issues, explained the Supreme Court's ruling, and understood the legal principles applied. Thank you for watching.